Hello, and you're very welcome to this session of Get Digital. My name is John McMacken, and I'm an assistant professor in the Work Psychology and Strategy group at DCU Business School. I'm delighted to be your MC for this session. Throughout this week in Get Digital, we'll be exploring a range of topics related to business leadership and entrepreneurship, with a particular focus on how businesses at all stages and of all sizes can harness transformational digital technologies to achieve their business goals. Tuning into this session now, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Alex Meisl, co-founder of Grey Hair Works, who will be enlightening us as to why digital solutions are a bit something unpronounceable. I'm sure Alex will explain that technical term to us. To our audience, we'd love to receive your questions, so please submit them during the session using the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that the chat function is disabled, so please only use the Q&A function. We will then compile the questions, and I will ask Alex to address as many as possible in the time we have available. So we're looking forward to your questions, and please remember to use that Q&A function rather than the chat function, which is disabled. And I know you're here to listen to Alex, not me, and I'm very looking forward to hearing them myself. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Alex.
John, thank you very much indeed. And hello, everyone. Thanks for, if you're a student, waking up early on a Monday morning. If you're a business person, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm going to talk today. I've been told I am allowed to swear a bit, so I'm going to talk about why digital solutions, to my mind, are a bit shite. How to do something about it, what I've learned along the way, some tips and tricks, some cheesy thoughts from a grumpy old man, and I'm hoping to cover everything from Greek philosophers to TikTok via the US Secretary of Defense and slagging off along the way. But first of all, do you really want to listen to yet another boring old fart? Well, why am I relevant? Mobile phone. One of the advantages of being old,
Alex, we're just finding it a bit hard to hear you. That's better.
That better. Apologies.
No problem.
What we've discovered is, so in other words, whilst technology might evolve, ultimately, and what this has taught us is that whatever you're doing, it still requires a great degree of discipline and to follow a methodology which has been around for ages. I think if you look at anything from marketing, where the sort of 4 Ps of product placement, pricing, and promotion are still relevant today, or any new technology, there's always that initial claim from the inventor of the new technology or proponents of new technology that this tears up all the rules and you can start from scratch. Ultimately, but the thought somehow gets rid of the need for profit. So, I mean, it's great news. Technology has never been deliver, and what with the pandemic, I'm sure we've all seen this meme probably multiple times. You led the digital transformation of your company, CEO, CTO, and that's great. And sadly, the pandemic has created many losers, but there have been many significant winners as well. And if we take no one more important than Martin Sorrell, the ex-boss WPP. He said that COVID-19 is a burning platform. This is brilliant news.
Alex, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think I know another number of people are having problems hearing you. Would it be possible to submit to remove the headphones, or does that work for you? I can't hear you at all now. No. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's little point in letting you go on when people can't hear you.
Can anyone hear me now?
That's much better. Yeah, that's
I
better.
have no idea what happened. I can only apologize.
Okay.
Shall I continue from here?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Alex. Yeah.
So someone as important as Martin Sorrell, ex-boss of WPP, said that COVID-19 is a burning platform for digital acceleration. And he claims that in a matter of months, most companies have seen 5 years growth in their digital acceleration. So this is great news, and this should be a huge opportunity for everyone. And yet at the same time, there are huge problems. And why are there huge problems? Well, fundamentally, many corporates, brands, retailers, etc., are like rabbits in the headlights. They are faced by so many different challenges that fundamentally they just don't know what they should do. And this has been backed up by McKinsey, who suggests that C-level executives, only 21% of them feel they have the expertise, resources, and commitment to be able to pursue new digital growth successfully. So why is that? And I think this chart, possibly more than anything else, makes it really quite self-evident. Just in the marketing technology space, or MarTech, from 2011, where there were about 150 different solutions out there, now there are over 8,000. And the lines are blurred between each of them to the extent that no one is capable of really understanding all of the variants and all of the different solutions which exist. And this is really brought to life when you take someone like Harrods. I was talking to a senior executive there the other day, and she reckoned that on a daily basis, she received over 40 approaches from vendors every single day. And when you're attacked at that level by vendors, often offering quite incomprehensible solutions, you cannot evaluate 40 different solutions on a daily basis. And the sad and awful news is that as a result, most of them end up here. So if they do end up in the bin like that, I would argue they're shite. And if they're shite, why is that? Well, to be honest, I would argue very often it's you. Now, obviously, I don't exactly know who's in the audience, so apologies. But the problem is people selling solutions, selling technology, typically do such a bad job that it becomes impossible for anyone to evaluate what they should be doing. And really, at this stage, I just want to do a quick sidetrack and thank you all very much, because ultimately, it's down to you guys that we were able to set up our current business, Grey Hair Works. And this is not a pitch for Grey Hair Works. Just to be clear, it's actually to explain why we set ourselves up and why it is relevant to this conversation today. What we have done is, in recognition of retailers being bombarded and brands and all sorts of corporates being bombarded on a daily basis by vendors trying to sell them often shit, we put together a network of senior C-level executives to help us trawl through all the relevant solutions out there to identify solutions which make a difference for corporates. and help them unearth those gems, not germs, within all of the solutions which are presented to them, help them deal with Rumsfelds and act as sparring partners to the decisions they make. And on the other side of the equation, we help a curated portfolio of scale-ups to get in front of those large corporates. For those of you who don't know what Rumsfelds are, this is Donald Rumsfeld, the former US Secretary of Defense, who coined this most amazing expression, which is, there are known knowns, there are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. And that's the case for corporates as well. And through that, luckily, we're able to work with companies of this caliber. But enough about that. Technology is the most wonderful thing. And thanks to technology, it has never been easier to get in touch with a target customer. And yet at the same time, it's never been harder to engage with that target customer. And if you think about it, that's really quite logical, because there are so many automated marketing tools out there which make it easier to spam and attack people. LinkedIn, which once used to be the most amazing tool to connect with people you knew and actually help each other, has just now been turned into a source of vast amounts of contact, typically irrelevant or inappropriate. And as a result, it creates catfishing, and you often see very rapidly that the people who engage with you via sources like LinkedIn are complete flakes as well. And they're complete flakes because very often you will get a message, that message is great, hey, can I connect with you? And you look at them and they seem quite relevant. And then one of two things will happen. They go completely silent when you've expressed an interest. Or even worse, they then attack you immediately, as I saw. This is literally posted a couple of days ago. I received a LinkedIn invitation to connect. I agreed. Within 5 minutes, I got the hard sales pitch. I chose to remove the connection. 5 minutes later, I get a message in my personal email if I disconnected by accident, and here's a link to their Calendly to book a meeting by the end of the week. And this isn't what LinkedIn is about, to my mind. But what it does is it creates a lot of bad blood. So what I decided to do, tying in with this, is set everyone a little quiz. So I'm now going to ask you 5 questions, and you've got about 3 seconds to answer each one. There's a prize for the person who claims to me they got them all right. And it's about spam. Question 1, how many, so 85% of all emails sent every day are deemed to be spam. How many is that a day? So the answer to that one, 122 billion emails every day are deemed to be spam. And the number 1 source of spam content is what? And this is 36%, by the way. Give you a second or two. The answer is advertising, I'm afraid. So if you imagine that number, so over 40 billion messages sent every day are people trying to advertise something. Rather more interestingly, how many emails need to be sent for a spammer to receive a single reply? 12.5 million. So imagine the 12.49999 million people who get very pissed off along the way. Email spam costs businesses over $20 billion every year. And finally, 7 of the world's top 10 spammers are from which country? I suspect many people think they know the answer. Well, in fact, it is the USA. So here are some thoughts about when you engage with folk. Because again, talking like a grumpy old man, the things which really get to me are bland platitudes when people talk to you or pitch to you or present something, incomprehensible shite, and verbal diarrhea. And I think it's very easy to resolve all of them, but it's quite difficult to realize that you're probably responsible for at least one of those weaknesses. I know I have been in the past. There's a great quote from Mark Twain. I apologize for such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. And I think this is very true. So as far as the bland platitudes are concerned, let's start maybe with mission statements. And I've taken a mission statement from 2019 from a large corporate, which could not be more bland if it tried. The corporate says it wants to be a company that inspires and fulfills your curiosity. Well, to be honest, if you think about it, that could cover virtually any business out there, from, you know, a brothel to anything. They had the presence of mind to change their mission statement quite recently. And it now reads, to fill the world with emotion through the power of creativity and connectivity. And creativity and technology. Well, again, that could be anything. That could be Starbucks, that could be Viagra. It doesn't really bring to life any sort of strong feeling of passion about the business, which, by the way, in case you didn't know, is Sony. When it comes to spouting gobbledygook, and I suspect, you know, a lot of the audience were probably not around when The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy first came out, but that there is, to my mind, a sort of strong feeling that a Babel fish is something which really is needed to decipher what people say when they are pitching their businesses or their propositions. And one of the favored tricks of many people is to fall back on the dreaded TLA, three-letter acronym. And just because you use acronyms or long words really does not make you clever. Your goal is to get your audience to understand what you're saying. And just because you are able to spout lots of acronyms does not mean that they're going to look at you in awe that you understand something better than they do. And really, this creates a sort of huge amount of woolly thinking. What I chose to do is also put together some of the buzzwords which irritate me most in this space. Best of breed, deep dive, surface, all of this stuff. But I must admit, a company we dealt with in the last month came up with a term which I think is going to take some beating. I'm going to get into awful trouble for quoting it, but they said, thinking outside the box, we think without the box. And to my mind, and this is on their website, does it make me think they're cleverer? I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll leave it up to you guys to decide for yourselves. But now is when I'd like to invoke a famous saying from the Greek philosopher Epictetus, which is, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And I think that's very important, because particularly in these times, time is probably one of the most valuable assets that folk have. So you need to be very careful in the way you use people's time, and you need to be efficient in the way that you engage with them. One of the tricks I've learned in Zoom meetings, which I'd encourage others to consider, is think about whether you really do need the full hour, the full 45 minutes or whatever it is to present whatever it is you've got to present. See if you can gift back to the person you're talking to 5 or 10 minutes of their time, because they will be forever grateful to you for having those extra minutes to have a comfort break or make a coffee or whatever. But going back to the whole digital transformation piece, Satya Nadella has said that any company that has digital technology in its core is going to be more resilient and faster to transform and adapt. And we've seen this before in previous recessions. These are companies launched during some of the sort of worst financial crises the world has faced. So there is every chance to be a success, even in these darker times. And we're seeing that the pandemic is creating new ways of working, which again opens up new opportunities. So Jack Dorsey of Twitter has said that employees will always be allowed to work from home permanently should they choose. Even more traditional companies like building societies, the Nationwide will allow all of its office staff to continue working remotely when coronavirus restrictions are eased, which, if anything, brought into perspective the very recent announcement by Google that staff will need to get special dispensation to work from away from the office for more than 2 weeks, into sort of slightly weird perspective. But not everyone gets the whole digital piece right. And if you look at the UK mainland, we have the sort of rather unfortunate story of Philip Green. And I thought the Sunday Times put it pretty well. An analog man in a digital world sees his empire turn to rags. Arcadia didn't move with the times and resolutely focused on being a traditional retailer. And sadly, we see the results. Now, when you compare that to a similar business like Next announced their results last week. They've suffered from the pandemic. Their profits have gone down. But if you look at their online growth, it increased near as damn it threefold in the last 10 years, and made up for the fact that physical retail, which obviously collapsed due to enforced closure of shops for long periods of time, but in effect, it allowed them to almost maintain their revenues over the last financial year. And what we are seeing, not just driven by the pandemic, but driven by the whole idea of digital transformation, the need to get more closely involved with customers, is there are new business models coming to the fore. So Nike are focusing very heavily on driving direct to consumer. And now 1/3 of all their business is them having a direct engagement and direct relationship with their customers. And it's not just Nike. One of the companies I particularly admire is PepsiCo for this. PepsiCo, when the pandemic hit, launched 2 major direct-to-consumer initiatives in 30 days using internal resources only. And they launched snacks.com and pantryshop.com. By the way, on pantryshop.com, make sure you spell it right in Google when you're looking for it. Otherwise, you end up with all sorts of rather more salacious content, which you probably weren't expecting. So the whole idea of direct-to-consumer and all the benefits that brings is being adopted by more and more folk. Where I get slightly more concerned, well, nervous more than concerned, I guess, is when on my, I think it was Instagram feed, I then get a subscription service offer from Finish washing up tablets. And, you know, I'm sure there is a need for this, but at the same time, I worry whether subscription is going too far. So just to be clear, I'm not being a miserable git. The world has never been in greater need of new ways to do things better. And people recognize the need to think more and care more about their footprints and make a difference. But when you're talking to corporates about this new magic thing you've developed, think about the 4 W's. Who are you? Why should I as a corporate care about what it is you do? What is it you do? And what's in it for me? And what's in it for me encompasses a raft of different areas and elements. It's not just in how will your solution make my life easier, but it will, how will your solution help my company? And how will your solution help me? Because I want to be promoted, or I want to go and work at another company. I need successes which are demonstrable, which I can boast about. Do you have a solution which will help me do that? So what you, as someone with a solution or service, need to focus on is perfecting your elevator pitch. And that's all down to discipline. There is absolutely no reason why you should not be able to explain in a compelling and catchy and memorable way what it is you do in less than a minute. In fact, I would argue in less than 30 seconds. And the goal should be in one sentence to clearly define what it is that is good about what you've got and how you set yourself apart. So when you're looking for what your next new thing might be, typically with innovation, it could well be in one of three areas. It could be product and service information, maybe something like Tesla. It could be business model innovation, something like, I don't know, cloud computing, or go-to-marketing and innovation, as we've heard. You know, that could be subscription services. But what I want to do now is just share a sort of raft of different thoughts and tips as to how you can become successful, and perhaps also why I've had a modicum of success in my career. And apologies, because some of them are really quite cheesy, but I make no bones to them because, to my mind, they're really quite relevant. The first thing is keep it simple. I've mentioned it before, but you know, make sure you really clearly explain what's going on and what it is you're trying to do. And for the students present, and apologies for this, don't over-research things too much, and don't always listen to advice you're given. Because to my mind, if you spend too long researching something or too long taking soundings from everyone out there, you'll be too scared to do anything at all. Much better to start something with a small degree of controlled naivety and passion, rather than be knocked into submission by hearing everyone tell you that it won't work. Because the experts aren't always right. This is a genuine article from the Daily Mail from 2000. The internet may just be a passing fad as millions give it up. I suspect that the internet's proved quite useful after all, so maybe on that rare occasion the Daily Mail got it wrong. Old age and wisdom. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes people who've been around the block do know what they're talking about because they've seen it before to a great extent. So it is worth talking to them and listening to them, because it could well be that their experience at doing something in a slightly different field or slightly different channel or slightly different technology is just as relevant today as it was before. And everyone needs to work together. David and Goliath, many small companies became big companies. So keep on pushing, don't give up. From my perspective, I'm a great believer in partnership. Running a company, I'm sure a lot of you will have heard or will have seen or experienced for yourselves, is quite a lonely business. And I've always found running a company in partnership with someone else to be both powerful and important, because ultimately you've got someone to share thoughts with, be up when you're down, who can lift you at the right times and can give different perspectives. Another key learning for me is don't be an octopus. It's don't try and do everything. Focus on what it is that you are good at and outsource everything else. So rather than keeping your fingers in every pie or extending your tentacles to doing everything, actually try and focus on the things which are unique to you or your business, and use third parties or outsource all the other bits to someone else. Now, this is a particularly English thing. I don't think it extends to necessarily all the other nations. But beware of tire kickers. Again, focusing on people in England in particular, there is an awful behavioral trait which I've discovered many times, that people are loath to say no. And I'm a great believer that a quick no is way better than a long maybe. And what you have to do is identify the traits and behaviors of people who are most likely to just spin you along and keep talking to you, even though they have no real interest in using your solution, buying your product, working with you in some way, shape, or form. So the ability to know when to stop that engagement is really important. So for my golden rules, number one is just never give up. Someone was telling me the other day that if someone doesn't respond to 2 emails, don't bother contacting them again. And it's a really finely balanced thing. What you don't want is someone who emails 100 times, but at the same time, emails get lost quite easily, or phone calls get forgotten. So important is always deliver. Now, that's such an obvious thing to say, but what shocks me a huge amount is eventually someone gets through to the right person, the right decision maker, the right partner, whoever, and then completely screws up by not doing what they say they'll deliver. So, hey, thanks for speaking to me. And at the end of the call, I will get back to you on Thursday with the information, or I will send you this, or I will do that. The number of people who don't deliver on it is shocking. And when you've gone to all that effort to engage in the first place, why waste that golden opportunity? And following on from that, find a way of surprising and delighting those customers. So over deliver. So whether it's, if you say you'll get back on Wednesday and you get back on Tuesday, whether it's paying particularly promptly, anything just to sort of show that you care about the relationship you are developing and that you are treating this person like a god. JFDI, apparently I can't say the F word, so I won't, but just do it. Get on with it, don't prevaricate, just make things happen. And don't forget that ultimately, to use that old adage, people buy people. So focus on the chemistry part as well, and the personal touch, and be engaging. Don't be a sales monster, but find ways of engaging with the person you're dealing with. And finally, and really importantly, just adapt. So understand what's going on, listen to feedback you're getting, and modify all the time. So don't be fixed with one set of approaches. Adapt your approach the whole time. And remember, from a corporate perspective, it may be new, it might be shiny, but it's only innovation if it helps the corporate. Now, going back to what I said earlier on about buzzwords, I thought that in my parting slide, it might be worth embracing TikTok just to show that I'm not too old. And this great thing I came across in.
Hey guys, can you hear me? No, cool. It's Terry. Yeah, real fast. Wanted to hop on and touch base and close the loop here. I have a hard stop at 12, so I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So as a quick level set, and I want to put this on everyone's radar, and you may want to keep this in your back pocket, I'm going to piggyback off your first point. We're in a very unique position right now to launch this whole thing at scale, so I want to make sure we're striking while the iron is hot and gathering all that low-hanging fruit and not burning the candle at both ends even though bandwidth is low, because we want to get shit done, and done is better than perfect. So we're going to need all hands on deck and boots on the ground, and those boots do need to be in lockstep because we're not saving lives here, but our lives do depend on it. So if anyone has any questions for me, that's about it. So feel free to ping me, circle back with me, keep me in the loop. My door's always open. Oh, looks like we all just got 5 minutes back. Hey.
So please don't be like Terry. Thanks for listening to me today. If you did, it sounds as if maybe for the first 5 or 6 minutes, you might not have been able to, in which case I apologize for the poor technology. But thanks very much for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, and I don't think it was 5 or 6 minutes; it was maybe 2 or 3. But and thanks for resolving that for us as well. In terms of questions, we have some questions. I'd encourage anybody who hasn't asked a question and wishes to do so in the Q&A. We'll try and get through as many as we can, and so I'm going to go straight to those questions. The first is from Abdul Wahid Khan, and asks, while focusing on core competency and outsourcing non-core functions is suggested, does it go against the idea of full stack type development capability?
Oh, blimey. Nothing like starting me off with a hard one. I think it's one of those dangerous ones where you need to know more about the situation before you can give a sort of hard and fast answer. I mean, full stack development absolutely makes a lot of sense. It's great for a corporate because everything's under one roof. My concern about full stack very often is that full stack probably means that certain elements of the stack are market leading and brilliant, but other elements of the stack are a bit average because whoever developed the stack has sort of bolted on acquisitions to come up with a stack which is full. So what you have to decide is whether you want a best of breed across all areas or whether you would prefer just to have one solution partner or technology partner delivering everything. The other challenge with that is even if you are going down or have gone down the full stack route, very often, because the full stack is made up of some in-house developed solutions and a few externally acquired bits bolted on, they probably haven't been fully bolted on, so it's not as integrated as maybe people would like you to believe. So I hope that sort of gives a rough answer at least.
Indeed, thank you.
Its finest.
The only safe place to be, and so yeah, very much so. And yeah, so let me take another question then. What do you think the critical success factors for direct to consumer are?
Wow, the offer is going to be compelling. The challenge with D2C, to my mind, is the cost of acquisition of a single subscriber can be quite high. And that's partly the cost of acquiring them, the cost of actually giving a freebie or whatever the incentive is to get them on board. So actually the real work starts once you've acquired that consumer, and it's ensuring that they are there for the long run. And perfect example, there's a company called the Craft Gin Club. They've done very well in the pandemic, but ultimately I believe it boils down to a bottle of gin a month. Now, if a bottle of gin a month is the cadence that most people drink gin, fantastic. Once you're on board and you get great gin, you'll go on getting it. And then you might have the reverse, Dollar Shave Club, for example. Now, if you wet shave, which I must admit I don't know how often people change their razor blades, but I'm sure it's probably not quite as frequently as the equivalent of Dollar Shave Clubs send out new ones. So again, at some point, someone will sit down and say, half a second, it's costing me this, when in fact, if I go to the supermarket on a slightly less frequent basis. So all in all, it's just making sure the maths stack up more than anything else and try and be slightly unique. I mean, I was slightly unfair on the dishwasher tablets. Yes, it might be easy sending dishwasher tablets to my house, and it saves me carrying the weight of a box this size, once every 2 or 3 months. Would I sign up to something like that? Probably not. So hope that helps.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Alex. Um, the next question is mobile just a distraction now? And is everything mobile?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think I think if you talk to certain corporates, they still think of mobile as a different discipline, but it isn't. You know, ultimately, people don't think in terms of channel. So, am I going to engage with this brand via my PC today, or via my tablet, or via my mobile, or going into a store, or social commerce, or whatever? It doesn't matter. So, ultimately, the experience should be as seamless as possible. I should be able to move from channel to channel, irrespective of whether it is mobile or anything else. There used to be a really interesting slide. I'm not sure if it's quite so relevant now, but a really interesting slide showing 3 different Amazon experiences based on the device used. So one experience was me going to the Amazon website on my PC, and the way things were laid out, they were laid out on the basis that it was likely I would spend a fair amount of my time on the Amazon website because it's on my PC. Whereas the experience on mobile was much more get them in and out quick. Now, I completely accept many people spend a lot of time on their mobile phones, but at the same time, if I'm on Amazon on my mobile phone, I just want to go, I want to search for something very specific, or I want to see the last thing I looked at. I don't want to spend ages trawling and sort of relying on serendipity. That's going to be more of a laid back situation when I am on a tablet or a PC. So as a result, no, mobile, it's just one of the routes and probably the principal route. And the extra thing I would say with that is it is absolutely vital that corporates ensure that the experience on a mobile device is good, because increasingly the public are less willing to accept average experiences on a mobile device. And research shows that if they get a poor experience on a mobile device, there is a very high percentage chance they will then go to a competitor instead to complete the transaction. And the number of people who assume it's a non-responsive website, but they'll just shrink it to fit onto the mobile screen. Life doesn't work like that anymore. Things have moved on.
Yeah, very good. Great. Thank you, Alex. On another tack, what new challenges do you foresee post-pandemic when work from home will be the new normal and a choice rather than a compulsion?
I mean, I think to an extent, it is to be embraced for people who want to work from home. I think I am very worried about working from home in other ways. Whilst it's something I've done for a long time and I'm very relaxed about, I think the younger generation, they absolutely need a work environment to be able to learn from their peers, to interact, to engage. And, you know, surprisingly enough, the younger generation live in poorer quality properties, accommodation than people who've been around the block a bit. So whereas I might have a spare room where I can have an office, most of the younger generation will be operating out of their bedrooms, and that's not a very healthy environment. So I think we're looking at some sort of mixed mode approach, number one. I think it shows that the idea of 9 to 5 is moving on. And I think that's great because it makes commuting more bearable and more palatable for people. But I think most importantly, it's some of the softer sides which we need to look at in a great deal more detail. It worries me a huge amount, as a result of the last 13 or so months of lockdown, that there are, I suspect, a significant number of mental health challenges being bottled up, which we still have not fully seen the impact on individuals. But I think companies have now got to engage with their staff in a much more holistic way and a more caring way, and think about ways that people do not have back-to-back Zooms or team meetings from morning to dusk. And I think as a result, perhaps that means a resurgence in a more broader role for HR departments to be able to engage with people in a more caring way. And some companies are doing it exceptionally well. But I think in some companies, HR is still about recruitment, one in, one out, rather than the sort of broader, more caring approach.
Great, thank you, Alex. For students starting out in digital, do you feel it's best to focus on one area, for example, social media, search or paid advertising, or get experience in lots of marketing/advertising?
So this is a sitting on the fence one again, because there are strong arguments for both. So when my generation was young, you're encouraged to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. That was really aspirational. And now we're hearing about telemedicine and AI being able to identify sort of certain problems. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting the role of a doctor will be diminished. It won't, but it will change. With a lawyer, I would argue a lot of the mundane things that lawyers do are more easily replaceable by technology these days. I mean, sure, when it's something more complex, yes. But if it's just knocking up an employment contract, that can be done with a sort of a web template or AI. It doesn't need someone being paid 200, 300, 500 plus pounds an hour to do that work. And in a way, that's why it's slightly difficult answering the question, because deep knowledge is always good. I've always, from a personal preference, preferred people who are generalists, because it doesn't pigeonhole you too early in your career. It gives you a chance to discover different things. So, if you force me to make a recommendation, I would suggest you tried a number of different bits and pieces, hopefully maybe under the same roof, or so you can transfer divisions within the company or transfer disciplines within the company. But, there are many people who've become real deep experts in certain subject matter areas who've done very well. So it's it's a hard one. Sorry, I can't be more sort of clear than that.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. And somebody noticed that you use TikTok and asks, do you get queries on whether people should adopt that? How do you approach ROI queries on TikTok or Instagram, etc.?
So the thing about new things, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, new things come along all the time. And for a period of time, there's a degree of fad. But ultimately, because demographics move as tribes, and TikTok is where it's at the moment, it is only logical that brands who want to speak to those tribes should therefore embrace that technology as well. I think to mention two names of experts who tend to elicit very sort of strong, visceral reactions. There's a guy who's a marketing professor who writes for Marketing Week called Mark Ritson, who I'm a big fan of, who believes in embracing new things, but not forgetting traditional disciplines. And then there's a guy called Gary V, who probably elicits even stronger emotions, who, to paraphrase, and I'm probably doing it very unfairly, says, throw everything you've got at TikTok. And I think in reality, it's somewhere between the two. I think brands certainly should be looking at TikTok at the moment, if their demographic is right for the people who use TikTok. And TikTok is becoming mainstream. I mean, Facebook is not used that much by young folk because parents started taking it over. You could say the same about Nokia, even Apple to some extent. And at some point, as more and more parents or grandparents get on TikTok, youth will find the next new thing to embrace, and brands will then slowly trickle away and start following to whatever the next platform is.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. So just going back to your mobile answer, is there any point in differentiating digital marketing now? Is all marketing effectively digital, or rather digital is so mainstream now the difference is not useful anymore?
To my mind, I think that the person who asked the question has almost answered it. marketing is all about engaging with people. I mean, there are lots of different definitions, and I'm not going to get into that in front of, I suspect maybe it was asked by a student who's probably studying it. But ultimately, I think to be really effective, most channels need to be embraced. So I don't think marketing is digital, but digital is a very significant part of the mainstream. Therefore, it needs to be embraced.
Okay. A more general question, really. Have you any thoughts on, and I think you may have commented to some extent on this, on how lockdown might change our views on what we might reevaluate in our lives?
Oh, blimey. So I'm the father of way too many just about adult daughters. And what fascinates me and their contemporaries is how much more giving and caring they tend to be than the more venal generations before them. And whereas I sort of grudgingly say this, there are many corporates who pay lip service to sustainability and CSV, etc. Comparing the sort of bland platitudes and sort of paragraphs you read in annual reports, etc., about, hey, we're doing our bit for the environment, is very different from what you hear from, the more younger folk who genuinely get it, genuinely believe it, genuinely want to make a difference, are genuinely concerned about their footprints. And all I'd do is I would say, I'm really sorry, because our generation screwed up big time. And sadly, you guys have got to pick up the pieces to an extent. And obviously anything we can do to help, yay, we'd love to. But I think, career is important, but achievements in a broader sense for many people are increasingly important as well. And also, I suspect that will lead on to a re-evaluation of the importance of families and spending an appropriate amount of time. I'm sure, my generation, we've all met people who'd start work at 6 and finish at 10 at night, never see their sort of children when they were growing up, couldn't quite understand why their partners divorced them along the way, couldn't understand why they still weren't happy even if they'd made lots of money, because they'd missed out on the important things in life. So I hope that this is a bit of a turning point where people will be able to spend more time thinking about what the right thing to do is.
Great, thank you, Alex. Back to the more core topic. I think earlier Paul Farrell from Virgin Media was discussing FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Are they just cannibalizing their own customers in at least two ways, selling their user data and competing against their brand agency customers?
Yes, I think to an extent that's true. Unfortunately, I missed Paul's presentation. I mean, I guess companies, when they start out, they're all about, they talk a good story about ecosystem and working in lockstep with lots of other companies. And because the way economics works and the way the stock market works and shareholders put pressure on companies, they are down a relentless path of the pursuit of growth. And it gets to the stage where you become more and more desperate, you try and do more and more things, and you try and become a one-stop shop. And in a way, this harks back quite nicely to the very first question about tech stacks. Tech stacks and FANGs, if you want, are trying to do more and more things and be more and more relevant to more people. Because the hope is that one day I will use Amazon to do everything I need to do, from shopping to watching content, to storing my photos, to powering my apps, whatever it is, or Google, it doesn't really matter. So, at some point it goes wrong. And at some point, as we've seen in the US, regulators then start worrying about the power these large entities have. So whether then there is the appetite or even the ability to break them up, who knows? But I believe that once you reach a certain size, it's quite difficult to be dynamic and you become more risk averse. And so sort of smaller, nimbler entities will always have the upper hand to an extent. But if one or more of their hands are tied behind their backs, it's difficult to compete. Back to Microsoft bundling issues and Googling bundling issues, etc., which caused a lot of concern over the last few years.
Indeed.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Someone's asked how many daughters are too many daughters.
I didn't know you could see the questions.
Yes,
I wasn't going to attempt an answer to that myself.
I
put my life at risk here. Yeah,
I have 4. They're all delightful. I have 0 regrets. But they probably will cause me to work later into my life than maybe I would have done otherwise. But my wife and I finally worked out what caused it, so all's good now. So thank you for your concern, whoever it was.
Well, on that cheerful and happy note, let me draw matters to a conclusion, and thank you very much, Alex, for a wonderful, insightful, and thoughtful responses to questions as well. So that was a most enjoyable and interesting session. Thanks too indeed to our audience for joining us and for the many interesting questions you put forward. It just shows how interesting Alex's topic was, I think, and his talk. GETDigital will continue with our first Ask Me Anything session featuring Jane Casey, Head of Digital Content at Pluto, Rosemary Clancy, Head of Engagement Strategy at Oracle, Malachy Callan, Marketing Communications Manager at Munich Re-Automation Solutions, and Anne-Marie Boyan, founder of the Sleep Care Company. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions, and my final thanks to Alex. A pleasure to meet you, and goodbye to everybody.